We're here at UCX Europe today. What are some of the key trends that you hear people talking about?
Well, I think AI is the big one. In the last, AI was big last year too, but one of the kind of triggers for this has been generative AI, GAI, which is kind of powered by what we call CAI, conversational AI. That's kind of the next level of AI technology that makes chatbots more human-like, more conversational, and more kind of acceptable to a broader user base, because the experiences to date haven't been great. But now this level of chatbot capability is a little more acceptable. You add to that this generative AI piece, which is now creating new forms of output that didn't exist before, because it's pulling from all kinds of sources, AI, and now giving you the content, whereas before it was more you asking it to generate it for you, but you're giving it the instructions. Now it's giving you the instructions and completing your sentences, completing your analysis, your emails, all of that stuff. So it has a lot of utility, but a lot of people don't really know what to do with it yet. And the business case is hard to justify. The vendors are still really not making money with generative AI because we're all learning as we go. So we're not at a point where it's like a critical business tool like having Excel or Word or Office 365. This is still very experimental. But, the appeal is so strong. Everyone wants to try it and play with it. And we will find those use cases. They're coming up everywhere, particularly in the contact center, where there's a lot of need for better ways to engage with customers, and that's where the AI pieces really come in. So you ask for a strong trend. Contact center is a big one for how they can put AI to work there.
You had to talk covering a lot of this with RingCentral yesterday. How are companies or vendors like RingCentral leveraging AI, and how is it impacting the general unified communication space?
Yeah, every vendor now has an AI story.
Yeah.
And Ring is a good example of that, right? We had a talk yesterday about changing or really impacting the customer experience. And the thing with AI, which makes it really interesting, is it can play at every level. So in other words, it can help agents be more prepared when a customer calls to handle that. AI also, of course, is part of what the customer experience is. So what the agent does is one thing, but the customer is also using oftentimes automated forms of service, which could be chatbots, it could be web chat, and those are being increasingly driven by AI. So there are a lot of pieces there, and then you start talking about how the brands are using AI. So the companies that are making the products and services to sell, they're using digital engagement with customers now in a new way that we didn't have a few years ago. So there are people coming to contact center when they have issues that they want to solve, but customers are also interacting with the brands in other ways, through marketing programs, through, there's a lot of outbound messaging that is sent to start conversations with customers. They don't go through the contact center. They go through sales and marketing organizations. So there's a more holistic view of the customer now, and companies like RingCentral are bringing that thinking to market to help their customers take a more, again, holistic approach to the technologies, right? In other words, not just what happens in contact center, but what happens across your entire organization to support your brand. That's a very different sales proposition, and we didn't have that in the market a year or two ago.
Are there any challenges that vendors are facing despite, the AI automating a lot of manual tasks now?
Well, sure. One of the challenges would be if you deploy AI in a way that's meant to be about saving costs.
Yeah.
Automation, we get that. Everyone wants to automate. But if it's viewed as just a way to bring down the numbers, now you start tying it to job cuts, replacing agents. On that basis, AI is going to seem threatening, right? When it's kind of a top-down approach. To make this work, and the vendors are very sensitive to this, to really get it going, you want to position AI as something that enhances what the agent is doing, rather than to replace them. It's not an either-or thing. Once the agents view AI as being kind of on their side, right, it's friendly to them, they'll embrace it. right? But if they think it's going to take their job, that's a different dynamic. That's not so good. So the vendors, as far as the challenge goes, they need to position AI kind of in the right way that's seen as going to make something better for everybody, rather than not just replace jobs, but be a surveillance tool to kind of track everything we're doing. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
So there's always that risk, right? That if you're a control freak, you're just going to want it for that. No one's going to want to see that happen. It's not good for anybody. The temptation is there. Also, you talk about challenge, hybrid work, right? Organizations trying to get people to be productive outside of the office. Well, there's a temptation there to say, these guys don't work very hard when they're at home. We need more ways to monitor them and keep them engaged all day long. That's where AI can kind of do a job, but it's not something people really want. It makes them uncomfortable. So that's a tricky balance to strike,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one last question for you today. If you could give one prediction for the future of UC, what would it be and why?
Okay, well, UC as a market is becoming fairly saturated, right? There's a lot of vendors. Everyone has a UC offering. I think as far as where it's going to go, UC can become commoditized if you're not careful, because you're basically, a lot of companies are kind of not giving it away, but they're building it into their offerings. This is one of the reasons why Teams is so dominant, because during the COVID, they bundled it in free with their Office offerings. It's hard to say no. You can't beat free. So for the vendors to stay in the game, they have to find ways to add new value. And one of the key trends that's happening to support that is a lot of the UC vendors are also partnering and integrating contact center capability with UC. And we're seeing a lot of that here at the show, where they're going with these integrated offerings, right, that say, hey, while we're doing this cloud transition from Prem, you can do UC, but you can also do contact center, and we can tie it all together. There's a good rationale for that. It's, one vendor to do everything. It's more centralized. So there's an appeal to that, right? So I think that's one way that the UC vendors can stay kind of ahead of the game, because if they're not careful, like the way VoIP made telephony for free, basically, UC is becoming that way with UCaaS. It's becoming an offering that is getting harder to monetize because everyone has it now. That's a tricky market to grow in. But the good news is a lot of companies are still in on-premise models. They still have to make that kind of cloud journey. And that's where UCaaS is a big opportunity, because that brings value they couldn't get with just premise-based technologies.